in order to be a successful musician, it's not completely necessary to do things right.
Never, ever, under no circumstances you're allowed to bring your hands up.
Don't forgive anything when you practice, but forgive yourself everything when you're on stage.
Hi everyone, welcome to the channel and thanks so much for joining us for this conversation. Today I have a very special guest, as you might have guessed and as we have already announced. This is one of the best pianists of our generation. This is a blogger, this is an educator, a wonderful piano instructor, Denis Zhdanov, who also happens to be my husband, and please subscribe to his channel, the link is up here. I wanted to thank, first of all, Denis for joining me on my channel in this video. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's so great to be here, to be invited here in my own piano studio and have this conversation with my wife. We don't have much chance to speak in real life because we're so busy with our project. So finally, we can speak. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Today we're going to discuss several interesting topics, and we have already received some wonderful questions from you, so we're looking forward to unwrapping our thoughts in regard to those questions. You might want to check out another video we have made a couple of years ago on stress management on stage especially. We're going to open up the series of questions with the first question from you, from the audience, and the question is about memorizing music and how we approach it, particularly with works that stretch the boundaries of traditional chord analysis. For example, Scriabin, Ravel, Debussy, etc. Denis, I believe you have made a video.
Yes, there is a video on
memorization,
four different types of memory on my YouTube channel.
We're gonna link it up here, make sure to check it out actually. But would you like to share briefly what you have been discussing, or maybe you have already arrived to some new conclusions after making that video?
Well, actually not. So for me, the system of memorization is pretty much the same. I just try to activate various memory types, and I think that we have a completely different approach to memorization, so it would be really interesting to see how it differs. My approach is to rely on different memory types. So when I learn pieces, first of all, I really try to consciously memorize a piece starting from at least day 2 or 3. So my approach is to read a short segment of, let's say, 2 or 3 bars really slowly and then immediately play it by memory, thus challenging my short-term memory. And each day I would make those segments larger and larger. So next day 4 bars and then 8 bars and so on. And additionally, I would really focus on challenging different memory types by, for example, challenging my analytical memory by boiling down the whole texture, if that's a complex piece, to just a chord progression and just learning the chord progression. For example, by playing the main melody and root version chords instead of all the texture variety which we might have in the score. Or for example, playing the melodies which I have in the right hand with my left hand, or playing them with kind of a wrong fingering just to make sure that I can play them by ear and not relying on my motor memory. Or for example, transposing stuff and so on. So I really try to challenge my knowledge of the spot, focusing on developing different types of memory. So that's my approach. So what is yours?
Wonderful. All the things that he's doing, I'm doing completely in the opposite way. Well, I have been quite visual, to say the least, from the very early childhood. I'm not claiming to really be a true synesthete, but I do have certain cross-modal connections in my brain, for sure. And for me, what means a lot is actually the imagery and the characters that are implied behind the music. So that's probably the first and foremost thing I would rely on. Yes, it's probably not scientific, yet it's probably wrong if you really would like to sort of put everything in order, but I can only rely on the ways that work for me. And that's not the only way. I don't want to only say that I create a character or feel a character and that's how I memorize. No, of course not. I do have a structural memory. I have to understand the form, how the piece works. For example, let's take something very common like a sonata form. I have to know for sure where let's say if there is an intro, where is the exposition going to start and where is the development going to start, if there is anything unusual, if there is a double exposition, if there is any codetta, if there is any other transition. I have to know where I am in the piece, of course. And I do analyze the piece to a certain extent to understand the form. Especially if it's a large scope piece, I don't just play whatever, obviously. But I do know people who have to analyze, who have to put the Roman numeral to every single chord, or who have to really put all the scale degrees and things like that. And I cannot do it this way. I just can't always function like this, remembering every single number. If this is like a 13, 9, whatever chord, it's not gonna work like this on stage for me, I know. But sometimes, of course, yes, as the author of the question has emphasized, there are very complex textures and there are very complex, let's say, repetitions. It can be with motivic structure that changes throughout the texture. For example, if it is something really kaleidoscopic, I can say, I do memorize it mathematically in a way. For example, Scriabin Sonata number 10. There is a place where there is a theme and there is a counterpoint to it, and then everything flips upside down. And it starts in the same way, but he switches the voices like this. And I had to memorize that, okay, for the first time, the theme is really in the lower voice or in the upper, or the counterpoint is in the upper voice or whatever. And then the next time it's the same beginning, but he switches it. So I do have to sometimes pedantically memorize these things. Or also the coda of the same Scriabin 10, it's in an incredibly fast tempo, and there are things that also get flipped. And I had to memorize it to a point that I just needed to play it, sort of in my sleep. I had to be really, really sure, and there's no time to look at the music, even though sometimes I do play these pieces with the score. Still, I had to rely on my memory quite a lot. And yes, when it might betray you, sort of your imagery might confuse you, you have to really sit down and write down what's in the upper voice, what's in the lower voice, where the harmony changes sometimes, and yeah, then it sort of comes all together. It comes naturally to me. I don't sit down memorizing measures after measures. I actually was really surprised when I found out that DENIS is doing that. I was like, what are you doing at some point? And he told me, I was like, did you really sit down, memorize? I never did it. As a kid, I would play a few times, easier pieces when I started, and I would memorize them quite soon. Actually, then I would diligently open the score on the first page. But I felt like I knew the piece when I was very, very young, and I never flipped to the second page. So like if the teacher would ask me something from the score, sometimes I would get stuck because I wouldn't even know if this is on the left page or on the right page. I already thought I knew the piece, and all my pieces were like left on the first page. This is not good, of course, and I learned to work with the score much, much later. But I did have quite a good memory from the childhood, and I did not have a system to memorize. It just came to me. So that's why I rely on maybe some other things, maybe non-scientific things, but so far.
Yeah, the reason why
okay.
I do this is because I also was a quick learner, but I had motor memory as my strongest. So I would just remember pieces with fingers very quickly. Mm-hmm. But then if you'd ask me to start somewhere, I could be lost, or on stage, if something happens and you have a mistake, you might feel like you're confused. So in order to strengthen my knowledge and to order to be able to deal with stressful situations, I forcefully slow down this learning process in the beginning by learning it not only with my motor memory but challenging all the other memory types. So then they all work together. So in the beginning it's kind of slower when you learn it that way, but then you have a much more profound knowledge of the piece and you feel yourself more secure.
It's true. I also learned to sort of not only rely on my motor memory, because I'm quite a tactile person and I rely a lot on kinesthetic sensations. But again, this is only one of the senses and you cannot fully rely on that. So I learned a little bit of that approach as well, to sort of, as I mentioned, to know the form, to know where I am. That way, it doesn't matter if the passage repeats itself or something, I'm not gonna, well, hopefully, not gonna get lost.
But let's reveal something intimate, because many people believe that professional musicians never make mistakes and never have memory slips. So let's reveal a little bit of our personal experience regarding this. Like, have you ever had some funny stories about how you would have a memory slip, or where you would suddenly jump from the beginning to the end, skipping most of the piece, when you have like similar spots but leading to another area?
Yeah, definitely. That was some time ago. I actually was not very lucky when I was I think about 18 or so. So that was during my last year of high school and something like before my first year of college. I was really stressed about something and I spent about a year not having a performance without a memory slip. And that was a sad year, one of the saddest years of my professional life, I would say.
But this was psychological.
This was psychological, I guess, and it could only work whenever there was a short audition, because a lot of auditions are something like 10 minutes long. They only listen, the committee only listens to 10 minutes. So a little bit of your program, like an exposition of a classical sonata, one etude, maybe something else. And I had no time sort of for a memory slip. But whenever it was a longer performance, like a recital performance or an exam where you play your whole program, it was difficult for me. When I was much younger, I did have a memory slip like that. Actually, like what you mentioned, I have started Chopin's Etude Opus 10 number 4. I was maybe 12 or something, and of course no brain yet activated, only fingers and impressions and an urge to play. And somehow I don't know why I ended up playing directly into the coda. So there's a place that leads you into the development section, but somehow I realized that I did not take that exit and I took the other exit right into the end of the piece. That was a school performance, so the teachers laughed. My classmate, non-pianist, did not figure it out. It was just a very short etude, like a shortened version. And my classmates who were pianists, of course, also had a good laugh, but it was nothing, life-changing, not an international competition or anything like that. I was very lucky that happened within the walls of my school, and it was fun for everyone. But I learned something on the day that maybe I should use my brain more on stage.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Do you have stories like that?
I had one catastrophic memory lap with a Messiaen piece, Van Regard number 10, which actually was one of my best pieces. So I successfully played it on other festivals and other concerts, and I was so confident about this piece. And some people still remember how I played this piece when I was like 19 or 18 years old, and they write me in comments even now like, oh, I remember you playing at Madness Festival, this piece, it was fantastic. But once I played this piece at a festival in Poland, and I was so sure about this piece that I was so confident, and something happened right in the middle, and I just lost myself. And it was so unexpected to me. I didn't expect this to happen so much that I just got immediately frustrated and lost, and it took me quite a few seconds to actually figure out where I can start the piece again. So just skipped something and I just started, but that was of course very embarrassing and everyone has noticed that. So since then I have understood that you have to always be prepared to such situations because we all are humans. And what professional musicians usually do, they create a set of cues throughout the piece. Like safe point,
Checkpoints.
like
Yeah.
checkpoints. So if something happens, you just jump to the next checkpoint. And you establish them every few bars, let's say. And of course, I also used to practice a lot by starting my piece from every beat of every bar, especially with fugues. And I have a special video on my YouTube, how to learn fugues.
It's up here.
And one of my strategies when I used to learn fugues as a kid, and also when I learn polyphonic music now, I really train myself to be able to start from every beat of every bar.
That's a good one.
That's
a really
yeah,
good one.
that's a cumbersome practice,
Wow.
but it really helps you to be able to enter the stream. So even if you get confused at some spot, you just jump to the next beat and you're safe.
And I have another tip, maybe for the younger musicians, a rule of thumb to always keep your hands at the keyboard or at your instrument if you're not a pianist. But for pianists, to never, ever, under no circumstances you're allowed to bring your hands up or towards your head or anything of that sort. No, never, because you're not gonna get back. And it's gonna be like a major gap.
Just keep playing something.
Just keep playing whatever.
Scales, arpeggios.
Yeah.
I had actually one great experience recently. One of my students at the university was playing the third ballade of Chopin. And I didn't know actually that he's that skillful because he had some challenges. It was challenging for him to play this piece. But finally he learned it and he was performing it on the concert. And then somewhere around the climax, something happened and he lost himself. And he seamlessly started to improvise, just playing some arpeggios in the same key and some chords and whatever. And if you didn't know that piece, you would not even figure out that something happened. He just improvised something like basic patterns of A flat major until he could enter some other spot and start playing that piece again from a certain spot. So it was absolutely seamless. It was a really great example how to get away from a memory lab.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I have heard situations, I wasn't there myself, but I have heard from someone who I trust that this person was at a concert of a famous pianist who was playing a Mozart sonata, and there was a memory slip, so he somehow took a detour and played some excerpts from another Mozart sonata and then got back to the first one and finished that. So guys, I mean, it's a free room for experimentation in case something happens. Instead of making a disaster out of it for yourself and for the audience, you know, find a creative way out and maybe back in, and it's better in any case than just panicking. Actually, a good practice for that is probably just starting to improvise and to maybe do that on purpose a few times while you're practicing running a piece through. Just take a detour at some point here and there when you more or less know the piece, just to practice this. So in case something happens on stage, you're not going to panic, but you're going to be prepared because you've done it before.
Yeah, my rule, which I apply to myself and which I teach my students, is don't forgive anything when you practice, but forgive yourself everything when you're on stage.
When you get backstage, that's the time to criticize yourself, but not when you are on stage, something didn't work, you missed a note, let's say, and then you get mad at yourself, and then
you miss 10 more because of that.
The next thing that happens is that you lose the piece. No, we are really respectful and supporting of ourselves on stage. Let's agree on that. Otherwise, what kind of success do you expect to achieve, right? Okay, the next question, 2 questions. For each one of you, who do you think is better pianist between the two of you? He is.
I wouldn't be that sure.
I answered first.
Oh, that's a shame. No, but I think we're just very different. It's very difficult to establish who is the better pianist in any context because people are so different and they play different repertoire. For example, I don't play late Scriabin, and we have already a Scriabin expert in our family, so I don't even touch that topic. So
I'm looking forward when hearing you whenever you are
to mock me and to teach me.
No, why? I would never do that.
Yeah, but I think that we are just very different, so that's why it's really tough to establish for sure who is the best pianist. And
well, Denis is an expert in everything, so I cannot really
except areas where you are an expert.
No, come on. No, don't think we have a competition between us. So I don't know what to say. I think you're an amazing pianist, and I learn a lot from you.
You're an amazing pianist as well.
I learn a lot from him, seriously. Subscribe to his channel to learn a lot from him as well. The next question was, why did you choose or end up learning piano when you first started? Well, my story is quite short. I was born into a family of professional pianists.
And didn't have any choice.
I did have a choice, but I wanted it myself. I got inspired when I was little. My father was practicing either for a concert or learning second piano, piano accompaniment for the concerti that his students played, something like that. So he was always practicing, and somehow I heard him play and I got so inspired. And I took my mom's hand, led her to the piano, and I said, teach me to play.
So your father was an initial inspiration, but your mother taught you piano.
Yeah, I asked her. At least that's what I was told by my parents. I remember some of it, but yeah, I think I remember asking my mom, and I remember how we started vaguely, and what I was told that I was discovered to have perfect pitch at around the age of 3. That's when I started playing. My father was playing the Dante Sonata by Liszt, and I somehow could replicate with one finger or with 2 fingers that this main theme with tritones in the upper octaves. I just took his hands off of the keyboard and I said, okay, now I'm gonna play. And I played those notes that he did. And then he said, who showed you? And I said, no one. I just heard it and just played it. For me, it was so obvious. Like, I heard it and I played. I found the right notes right away. And then he started testing my perfect pitch because he didn't believe me. He was like, you looked at what I was playing, or like someone taught you or whatever. So he started playing different notes to me and asked me to find them when I was turned around, and he didn't believe that I didn't peek around. So he said, okay, I'm gonna close the door and go to another room. He wanted to be sure. And he did that, and I would come back and find that same note right away. That's how my parents discovered it, and I wanted to play. So that's how it started. My mom taught me first, and then then it got further and further. What about you?
Well, that's a longer story. So my parents are not musicians, and we just got an upright piano from our friends who just moved to another city, and they didn't need it anymore, so they just gave it to us because it was very challenging to actually sell an upright piano at that time in Ukraine in the early 90s. So we just got this piano, and it was standing at our apartment. And I was the only child, and I was already 8 years old by then. And my mom just decided, well, since we have a piano, maybe let's use it for just general development, general music education. And she wanted me to take some classes at the secondary school where I used to study, which were, of course, of a very basic level, nothing serious, but nobody has expected that I have any kind of talent or ability to play piano. So it was meant just for a general education. But then one person who actually did a lot of nasty stuff to my mom, but at this point she gave her a priceless advice to go not to this place, but to the best music school in town. And she said to my mom that, well, if he doesn't handle this, you can always switch to a weaker option, but just give him a chance in a good music school. And my mother listened to me, and I was so happy and lucky to get the studio of the best music teacher of my town, who became like a second mother to me. And she allowed me to just fall in love with music completely. And of course it was so inspiring and so great to study with her that this gave me this never-ending passion with classical music. And it was a fantastic story because this taught me that even people who do you a lot of harm at some point may actually provide you with something that would be transformative to your life.
Great. Thank you for sharing this. Okay, so the next question is about the pedal in Baroque and Classical periods.
Well, I have nothing against pedaling in Baroque. It's really funny to observe different opinions and to witness different standpoints. I even had some funny reel about Andros Schiff and Murray Pariah, who were saying completely different things. Andros Schiff was in his phase of denying any pedaling in Bach, and Murray Pariah made the point that it should sound like in a church, so you have to use a lot of pedal. And, well, everyone is right and everyone is wrong. We just have such a different instrument nowadays, and whatever we do on this instrument, it won't be fully authentic. So I don't really myself want to play in authenticity games and pretend that I'm playing Bach in the authentic way. So I just do it reasonable, as I think is reasonable. For example, I use pedaling for enhancing legato. So I would use short pedaling for connecting notes where I can't connect them perfectly with the fingers. Or sometimes if the spot allows, like for example, the beginning of the second partita by Johann Sebastian Bach, I would use some pedaling just to make those mighty chords sound less dry. But of course, one important rule for me in Baroque and classical music is to show all the rests. So I would not pedal through the rests. When I have a rest, I really want silence. This rule doesn't apply to romantic music like Schumann or Chopin, because there we are actually allowed to pedal through the rests when, for example, you have the ending of Schumann's Fantasy, the second movement, or some Liszt pieces. When you have short chords at the ending of the piece, for example, they are loud and you release the fingers, but you actually can hold the pedal. So your articulation, your body language, your gestures are short, but your pedal is long, providing this kind of like reverberation across the room. So this is what we do in romantic music. But in Baroque music, I would be just very careful with the poses and with the dissonances. So just making sure that the pedal is delicate, that it doesn't let notes overlap when we have a melody.
I second to that, absolutely. And I would add that with our modern pianos, it's not possible to replicate the authenticity in a way what those composers have heard and how they composed by using the instruments they have had. And if you're into that, you're of course more than welcome to explore the realm of the historical performance, where there are people who research on this topic and they really concentrate on replicating stylistically, and by using the instruments from the historical era, they replicate the music the way they believe it's supposed to sound, or it did sound back then. So if you are into that, maybe that makes sense for you to study this field. However, with the modern grand piano, it's not even possible to try because it is so different. So either you play and use the features of the modern piano, or you go back to the historical periods, the historical instruments, because I don't think it would work otherwise. And of course,
called historically
informed
performance practice.
Yeah.
So you can Google that,
which is great, and it's very beneficial if you try that, even if you are not planning to become a performer in this style, in this practice. But of course, it will be very informative, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And also, our instrument really dictates what kind of technique we are using. So there's a brilliant research by one lady, I forgot her name, maybe you can mention her in post-production, who made a research how she had to transform her technique from a broader arm motions and more like rounded motions, and feeling the arm as one unit and using the bodily mass in order to play piano and do all that stuff which we do on a modern piano. And when she switched to historical instruments of Mozart's time, she had to completely reduce that and to barely move her fingers. And this explains, for example, why musicians like Heynon were advocating for finger-oriented approach, because they had just very different instruments which were up to 10 times lighter than modern instruments. So nowadays we can't play like this, but we have to understand that for those people living in that era and having those instruments, that was indeed the way to go.
And the repertoire was different. And the instruments were different. So, next question would be, I would like to ask about your opinions on improvising, adding flourishes and cadenzas on top of a romantic period composition, Chopin, Nocturne, Liszt, Etude, etc. Well, for the Baroque, I think it was necessary. For example, if you are repeating a part of a movement from a suite or a partita, you cannot repeat it in the exactly same Xeroxed way. You have to add embellishments. That's a Western rule of thumb. That's their tradition from the Baroque period, and nowadays it's being reborn and studied. So I would say for the Baroque, for sure. For
Mozart
Chopin,
used to write
Liszt.
whole notes sometimes in his concerti. Mozart would write just one whole note in one bar and another whole note in another bar,
Meaning
and
a
you were
cadenza.
meaning that you have to kind of create some passages.
I think for a
in that
concert
key.
it's wonderful. For
And
a
of course,
competition,
you would compose cadenzas. So I remember me composing a cadenza to Mozart's Concerto number 21 for Queen Elizabeth competition, and most participants would actually compose their cadenzas.
the video is up here.
So that's a great practice. That's a great practice. Although I've never studied composition, and unfortunately, I wasn't really trained in improvisation. But I think this is absolutely great stuff, and I would really love to dedicate more time exploring and actually acquiring this skill.
Yeah, I think it's really, really wonderful. I'm not sure about the romantic music though, because these composers have been quite precise about what they wanted. Chopin really took the time to write out his articulation, markings, his ornamentation, and I'm not sure if you keep adding stuff to his polonaises and mazurkas and ballades and so on, if it's gonna really get better.
Well, if you really present yourself as an improviser, and there are people who really present themselves as improvisers, you can actually make this as a concept by playing a piece of a given composer and then adding some improvisation. It's just something that you have to kind of announce, and you have to probably prepare your audiences that you are not presenting this piece in its purity, but that you are going to actually play with it and improvise. And of course, you would rather do this in a context of a recital, but probably it's better not to do this when you're playing an exam or a competition.
No, not at competitions for sure. I think competitions are quite conservative.
Absolutely.
Unless there is a requirement for something like that. I don't know, actually, maybe there is something of that sort nowadays, but in our days,
well, some
there
competitions
wasn't.
give
had
you
to be
a
precise.
freedom to improvise. For example, a 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕚 competition in Finland, which I was doing in 2012, they gave you a choice of either playing a contemporary piece composed for a competition, or playing your own composition, or improvising on a theme which they would give you just 15 minutes before your performance. So you could choose from these three options. And I
That's
remember
great.
that a couple of people dared to improvise, although even people who actually improvise well, most of them were kind of reluctant to do this at a major piano competition because, the stakes are just too high to embarrass yourself.
More questions. We're gonna be quick. How do you balance your individual artistic pursuits with your shared life and goals as a couple?
Oh,
We don't know.
it's tough.
We just go with the flow. I don't know what to say. We both pursue our careers. We both work a lot. And currently we're working on establishing or finding a way towards some work-life balance. I'm not even saying finding a work-life balance, finding a way towards it. So we're working on that. Do you have another answer?
Well, we actually share a lot. For example, we performed together sometimes, not very often, but once or twice per year. We have some 2 piano duo performances. We also share some students, so we teach the same students, both of us.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Not everyone is
but
shared.
but it's also fun because we can shape them from different angles, let's say. While our general approach is similar, but nevertheless, of course, we're different people. So it's really cool. And I had the same when I was a teen. I would study with a married couple, with both female and male teacher, and they would give me lessons throughout the week. So that was very beneficial. Absolutely great.
And you were around 14?
Yeah,
15?
Between 15 and 18 years old.
It's important not to do it too early, though. I must stress
that might work for,
not for
teenagers
kids, not for little
or
kids.
adolescents.
Little kids have to have one teacher, for sure, for some time at least, to just FYI. What role do you think technology such as digital pianos and recording software has played in shaping your musical careers? Well, your story with a digital piano is priceless. You must speak about that.
Oh, right. Yeah. So when I was about 20 years old or 21, I was preparing to Maria Canal's competition in Barcelona, which is quite big, 4 rounds, the 4th round with the orchestra, hundreds of applicants, so it was quite massive. And I used to live in a student house in Italy. And it was a very budget-friendly student house. I barely had any money, so it was my poorest year where I couldn't pay even those 150 euros per month for this student room. And they were patiently waiting for me to get some money, and my rent was due like 3 months. And I was preparing for this competition on a vertical piano, which we were allowed to practice in a silent mode mostly. So it was a very light Yamaha, very small, like box type of upright piano.
Upright or digital?
Upright piano with a digital mode. And most of the time I would practice in a digital mode with my earphones. And then I arrived at this competition and suddenly have a rehearsal on a concert grand Yamaha, which is 2.5 meters long, in a huge hall for 1,000 people. And I understand that I just can't control this piano because I used to practice e-piano, like in a digital way, for so long, for so many weeks, that it was a complete disaster. And I have no idea but how I did this, but I actually managed to get used to acoustic pianos again during those first couple of days of that competition, and somehow I won. So actually, it's limiting, but nevertheless, practicing e-pianos is better than not practicing, for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna talk much about the recording softwares because you're probably subscribed to at least one of our channels if you are watching this video. If you're not subscribed, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the bell. And here is a channel of my cross-disciplinary team, Intertwining Arts. We have released 6 full-scope multi and cross-disciplinary productions. You might want to check it out if you have not done so yet, and subscribe as well. And that's my short answer to how the recording possibilities have shaped my career during the last 10 years. Do you think the classical music world is doing enough to promote diversity and inclusion, and how do you see your own roles in this effort? No, I do not think that the classical music world is doing enough to support and promote diversity and inclusion, probably depending on the country, but generally I think there is a lot of work to do.
I think that classical music world is quite conservative, but also I think that there are natural reasons why certain demographics and certain nations have more interest in classical music than the others.
I started thinking more maybe towards people with special needs. And of course there is a very prominent violinist, 𝕊𝕦𝕤𝕚𝕤𝕚. I'm sure you know him. There is also the guy, what's his name? He won, he can see, he won with the first Chopin competition, the 𝕊𝕦𝕤𝕚. I think, is he from Japan? That's a marvelous case, absolutely. But I do not know that there is a lot of such cases. Maybe it's me, maybe I'm lacking some knowledge. Please write in the comments, actually, guys, please write if you know more people or maybe YouTube channels of people who are maybe not the typical representatives of the classical music scene, because we do need this information, we do need this exchange. And thanks so much for the question. And I think this is a place to really share values and promote diversity and inclusion. Have you ever seen the light when you first started listening to Scriabin? What was your experience? It seems everyone was encountered that experience, including myself. I have not seen a light. I have seen a puzzle and a mystery, or rather sensed, not seen, I would say. Something unknown, something strange, something one might want to discover. And it was more of a case when, there is a fairy tale about something when one is forbidden to open a wardrobe or look somewhere, and then you open the wardrobe and you are, in Narnia or somewhere else. You discover something when you were forbidden to go there. Well, I wasn't particularly forbidden to play Scriabin's music, but I was told certain things that could have been demotivating, but instead somehow I got even more curious. At some point I might talk about it more in detail, but I'm gonna leave it at that for now. So it was more of something unclear, something mysterious that I wanted to pursue, that I wanted to discover. And one more question. If you want controversial, then how about the controversial metronome markings of the 19th century?
Well, there is a funny assumption that some musicians say that, for example, Beethoven was using a metronome not correctly. He was reading not the right place of that metronome, of that pendulum.
Are you serious?
That's why most of his markings are kind of much faster than they are supposed to be,
really?
Or something like that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not sure about that. I can't be 100% sure, but I've heard that multiple times. So that might explain why some of his tempi are kind of crazy. But in general, again, just dealing with pianos which are a few times harder than historical pianos, it might be reasonable not to really treat those metronome markings that literally. Also because tastes also change, and we don't really have to play it the way it would be played 150 years ago, because we are a little bit different people as well.
Yeah, and again, if you would like to replicate the historical performance, there is a whole field. It sounds like I'm advertising it. No, I'm not. It's just, when people are trying to sort of put things together that don't work, and maybe it wouldn't work in the same way on modern pianos with a particular resonance that these instruments give us. What is the point of trying to replicate something that would not end up being replicated anyway? So I think a lot depends on the personal background and education from which your personal style emerges. And there are some things that you just cannot explain, but you know after you have received your education, and hopefully your professors gave you a good one. Then you do have your own opinion. What tempo would you like to play a certain piece or a movement in? And maybe that opinion could change if you give that piece a break and then you come back to it several years after. Maybe you will realize that at that point your ideas about the movement and the tempi and the flow would completely change, and you're more than welcome to explore that as well. I don't think there is a rigid rule that something should be exactly as this metronome marking or not, or you can completely chaotically explore. I think you should use your personal judgment based on your education and the style and the taste. That's why not only practice a lot, but practice smart and choose your teachers wisely.
I think that in general, in order to be a successful musician, it's not completely necessary to do things right, but it's absolutely necessary to do things in a very appealing way. And those are different things. They might be different things.
I think in order to break rules, if you really want to, or need to, or feel an urge to, A, you must know the rules really well. And B, you must have a very strong reason to break those rules. You must be able to really stand up to your opinion in every single note, every single rest, every single gesture, slur, pedal, anything. You must be convinced yourself that this is the way you want to do it. And you must be able to explain why, in case you're asked. Maybe you never would be asked, but that is for yourself to know that you're not just playing it because you are in this particular mood, but because that's your concept, that's your strategy, and you decided for it in this way. That's the only way you're going to sound convincing to yourself and to your audience on stage, no matter what. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for hosting this conversation.
I'm so grateful to all of you who have watched this video until the end. Subscribe to Denis's channel, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so, hit the bell and subscribe to the channel of Intertwining Arts. And I'm going to see you in the future videos. Practice smart. Bye.